Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar entitled Deep Cleaning, Reducing Lead Exposures in Early Learning Centers. I am Michelle Nakaradi-Chapkis, Executive Director at Women for a Healthy Environment, and I'm joined with my colleague, Samantha Hernandez, who is the Healthy Early Learning Coordinator. And the two of us tonight will talk to you a little bit about lead exposure, helping to give you a better understanding about the sources of lead, its impacts of lead, and how to reduce those exposures in the early learning environment. To give you a little bit of background about Women for a Healthy Environment, our nonprofit organization reduces those environmental exposures in the built environment. And so we focus that effort in homes, schools, and early learning centers. And our goal really is to reduce those environmental exposures that we know impact public health. So as you can see here, here's a little bit of information about our vision: to educate, provide action steps, and advocate for healthier spaces. Again, emphasizing the spaces where children spend their days, where they live, learn, grow, and thrive. Our mission is to educate and empower community members to be ambassadors about those environmental risks and to advocate for change. We know that early learning providers, such as all of you, are the drivers of change in keeping children healthy and safe from environmental toxins and toxics in their learning environment. And we know that you are part of the solution. Certainly, you want to protect those spaces where you have children throughout the day, as well as all of your staff members. Next slide. So here are the learning objectives that we will go through this evening throughout the course of the webinar. Learn to identify the sources of lead in your environment. Learn how lead impacts the children's health and development in the center, as well as in the places they spend their days. And so what we will share with you this evening are applicable both in your environment, but also in the children's homes. Learn about the lead policies and the regulations that have been passed in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, so you have a better understanding of expectations and what's required of the early learning provider. And then learn how to deep clean to reduce lead dust in the learning environment. So a little bit of Lead 101, just to give you a little framework for where lead is found. So here are the common sources of lead exposure. Lead-based paint. So we know that it's common in homes built before 1978, but the greatest risk is in homes that were built before 1950. So 1978 is the year that lead was banned from paint. So anything prior to that could potentially have lead in it. We see that both in residential structures. We know that throughout the Northeast, we have lots of aging homes, a lot of aging infrastructure. And as a result, we certainly know that oftentimes when we find lead in homes built before 1978, they oftentimes have lead present. And so as a result of that, there have been ordinances that have been created to help reduce the risk and reduce the exposure. We also have found them in commercial spaces as well. So whether you are a home-based provider or in a commercial space, lead presence is to be of concern to you. And so we're going to help to identify those hazards. Dust, so chipping paint that turns into dust may contain lead. Oftentimes we talk about the chipping, cracking, and peeling paint as something to be concerned. Places of friction, so opening and closing doors, opening and closing windows where lead-based paint could be present is also of concern and something to be looking for. So any place where dust will gather in where you want to be able to be paying attention to that and addressing that potential harm. Soil. So we know that soil may be contaminated with dust if it's near buildings containing lead paint. So that could be demolitions that have occurred in your community where there has been a spread of dust. It could be from old industrial sources that still perhaps emit lead from the various activity of the industrial source, as well as historic uses that no longer are present, like lead in gasoline. So those emissions from leaded gas back in the day have deposited lead into soil as well. And we know that by tracking that soil into the facility, you could be potentially creating a harm. And so that's why we make certain that bare soil is always tested for lead. You might have heard a lot about lead in drinking water. And so as a result of that, plumbing fixtures, we know, older hardware in facilities like the pipes and the faucets that may leach lead into the drinking water, as well as a lead service line that connects your line from inside the facility to the curb box, and then ultimately to the lead service line that exists running through neighborhoods. Could also be a potential source of lead. And it certainly depends on how long the water stays in the pipes, the amount of wear in the pipes, and the water's acidity, as well as temperature, that could impact the presence of lead in drinking water. And then lastly, workplace exposures in consumer products. So toys and jewelry, glazed pottery, ceramics and such. Things like costume jewelry, perhaps, that could be used for play in an early learning environment. Imported spices and certain hobbies. So hunting and fishing items also are known to have lead in them. And so what is the impact on a child's health, and why is this so critically important? Science has shown us, so we know this is evidence-based, and the information is certainly not refuted. It's accepted by all, that lead exposure damages the brain and the nervous system. And especially if you think about children as vulnerable populations whose body is growing at a rapid rate of development. We know that lead exposure has been linked to learning and behavior problems, as well as hearing and speech. We have seen slowed growth and development as a result of lead exposure. And so as you think about all of those different things, lead is something that we have known for a very long time has impacted a child's development and ability to learn and to grow and to achieve academic performance. And so it hinders their ability to learn in the classroom. And that has been shown through such studies as third grade reading levels. So what do we know about lead in Allegheny County? Well, we know that more than 80% of the homes in the county were built before 1978. And that Pennsylvania ranks 4th in the US for total homes built before that period. We know that more than 40% of the homes were built before 1950, and that some Pittsburgh neighborhoods have greater than 10% of the children who tested positive for elevated blood levels. Allegheny County requires all children to get tested for lead exposure at between 9 and 12 months of age, then again at 24 months of age. So that's a mandatory screening that had been passed by the county in 2018. And so we want to be certain that all children who are in those age ranges are tested for lead, so that we can assure that if there's the presence of lead, that we can have an investigation and determine the source of the lead so that it's removed. What do we know about lead in Philadelphia? Again, more than 80% of the homes in Philadelphia were built before that time period, that critical period of 1978 and prior. More than 50% of the homes were built before 1950, up to, again, this is a similar pattern to what we're seeing in Allegheny County, up to 10% of Philadelphia's children have elevated blood levels. We often hear about it being referred to as lead poisoning. And that according to newly developed research, the highest risk areas of lead exposure are in the North and West and Southwest Philadelphia regions. Low-income children, children of color, and urban children have an unequal burden of lead exposure. As an example, we know that children, for instance, in Pittsburgh have a rate of lead poisoning at 4 times greater, children in predominantly Black and brown communities, 4 times greater than children in predominantly white communities. So let's talk a little bit about lead policy in Pennsylvania. There was the Pittsburgh Lead Safety Law that was passed in November of 2021 and had 180 days to enactment. And what that ordinance says is that childcare facilities that were built before 1978 require inspections for lead in paint, dust, and soil. And if lead exposure is found, the facility must remediate that and get that facility re-inspected. So what had already been shared with many providers to date is that that they need to receive or submit their annual registration with the City of Pittsburgh's PLI department, which is the permits, licenses, and inspections. Once that registration occurs, then you would have to apply for an inspection request through the One Stop PGH portal. There's a registration fee of $35, and the inspection is required at least once every 3 years. So again, now in Philadelphia, there was a lead safety law that was also passed a couple years prior to. Again, it says that childcare facilities that were built before 1978 must provide a lead safe free certification. It's a little bit different than the Pittsburgh law. This means that the building owner or the facility owner is responsible for the lead testing and the lead safe renovation that would have to occur if lead exposure, if lead is being found as being present. If lead is found, the facility must remediate that location and get a reinspection and then submit that information to the city. So submitting inspection and renovation results to register with the City of Philadelphia's Lead in Healthy Homes program. So lead safe certificates completed after February 1st of 2020 are valid for 4 years, and then the lead free certificates do not expire. So how do you prepare for an inspection? You need to check inside the facility, meaning looking at the floors, both bare and carpeted, the windows, the windowsills, the doors and door frames, as I mentioned earlier, as well as stairs, railings, walls, ceilings and trim, banisters and porches. These are the places that people frequent, that again have friction surfaces when you're opening and closing those things, when you're putting your hands on those surfaces and walking up and down steps, for instance, and where you're where there's a heavy traffic area. So all of these places are things that are areas of exposure that you would want to be concerned about, both for the children in the environment as well as staff. And in addition to that, you would want to check outside the facility. So as we know and heard, there are different places outside on the exterior that could be potential sources of exposure, and that's the porch, as well as various doorways and any bare soil that would be present on the property. Deep cleaning is important for inspection. You'll learn a little bit more about how to do that this evening. And then certainly, if you want to have lead testing done and then potentially remediation to follow, you could contact our organization for more information and next steps for how to go about that process. Okay. So what to expect during an inspection? This is an inspection, whether you would hire a consultant to perform the inspection or whether somebody from the city personnel, such as in Pittsburgh, would be performing that inspection. An exterior assessment for bare soil and deteriorated paint would be one of the first steps that you would see. And then an interior assessment for deteriorated paint. Again, they're looking for that chipping, cracking, and peeling paint, as well as performing a lead dust wipe sample on the floors and the windows in at least 4 rooms where children occupy. So that would happen in the Pittsburgh scenario. If you are perhaps having a full lead inventory risk assessment done by a consultant in Philadelphia, you'll also have some other steps that we'll be taking account. So lead risk assessments identify the lead hazards and the management strategies to control those hazards. And it's done by a certified consultant, somebody who's gone through a program and been certified to complete that work. Lead abatement, so that includes then lead-based paint removal, is designed to permanently eliminate lead-based paint hazards. There is also something called an interim control, which is making a property lead safe. In that, those interim controls basically cover about a 20-year time period by the type of remediation work that happens during that process. These may be ordered by state or local governments. So, for instance, a local health department could perhaps order a full lead inventory risk assessment once a child's been identified with an elevated blood lead level. EPA requires that individuals who perform that abatement project in a pre-1978 house or child-occupied facility must be trained and certified for that work to occur. So you'll want to look for a contractor who actually has been certified in what's known as RRP certification. That might be on our next slide. There you go. An RRP certified contractor to do that work. And that information will be listed. Those who have that certification will be listed on a website. And as you can see, that will be here. So RRP stands for renovation, repair, and painting projects that are performed by request of the property owner to reduce those lead-based paint hazards. Those RRP projects can disturb lead-based paint in buildings, the facilities, the early learning environments that are built before 1978. So you could potentially create new lead hazards. And that's why the renovators must be trained and certified in these lead-safe RRP practices. They know the proper techniques and tools that need to be done to making that property lead safe. So there are many different protocols that would have to be followed. Again, this is an EPA program, and so EPA, as well as an EPA regulation. So this is something that the federal government says must occur. And so in order to find those firms that are certified in your area to be RRP certified, you can follow this link as it's listed here on the slide. So what are some lessons learned from lead safety inspections that have occurred to date? And we had reached out and engaged the folks at the PLI department in the city of Pittsburgh as they've begun to kick off their program here to help us share with you some information and its insights about the process that they've witnessed, seen, participated in to date. And so what they have indicated is that certainly addressing all chipping and peeling paint immediately in the facility is critical. To do a thorough cleaning with disinfecting wipes and as well as a HEPA vacuum. So a HEPA vacuum is a vacuum that is going to actually filter out those lead particles, that dust, in a way that we know is more health protective, as opposed to a traditional vacuum that might actually emit more dust from the vacuum when it's pulling up particles. Common areas with dust have been window ledges and window sills, as well as we know that deep cleaning needs to happen routinely to manage lead dust. So it's important to do a deep cleaning in preparation for your inspection, but to continue that deep cleaning throughout the course of the year. So making certain that that becomes a routine for new cleaning that occurs, a new way to clean throughout your cleaning regimen. So your traditional cleaning might be thinking about cleaning for sanitizing and disinfecting, but you really want to have this deep cleaning approach on a weekly basis to make sure that it's routine to manage dust inside your facility, because we know that dust is where a lot of toxins and toxic exposure exist, and how to reducing that. And so we know that, for instance, lead creates lead dust, and we want to be able to manage and reduce all of that exposure, if not eliminate. So I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Samantha, who will talk to you about introduction to deep cleaning and how exactly to go about that process. So Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. So before you clean, you want to prepare the area. So you want to clear the area of any items that will get in the way of the sweeping and vacuuming. And you also want to make sure that children are not present in the area. So if it's possible, it's ideal to clean after hours when children are not present. And the cleaning equipment you will need is a HEPA vacuum, a mop with a buckets, and if possible, also a wringer, a broom and dustpan if you're doing a dry sweeping, and a spray bottle, which will be used for wet sweeping, which I will go into more detail later. It's also good to have gloves to protect your skin if you're using cleaning products. Okay, some other items you will need is an all-purpose cleaner, some warm water, microfiber cloths, which we prefer over rags because microfiber cloths are better at trapping dirt and dust. Also some paper towels, sponges, and trash bags for disposing of the waste. So this webinar is mostly focused on the cleaning aspect, but sanitizing and disinfecting is equally as important. And just as a word of caution, it's never use chlorine bleach and ammonia mixed together. So if possible, try to use alcohol and hydrogen peroxide because those are safer alternatives to bleach. Also, if you can, avoid dry sweeping just because that can spread around dust. Instead, you can do a wet sweep, which I will discuss briefly, or you could do a HEPA vacuum through the area. And as much as children may want to participate with the cleaning, it's important to keep children away from the cleaning materials just to avoid their exposure to the cleaning products. Okay, now when it comes to differentiating wet sweeping and dry sweeping, wet sweeping is used when there are large amounts of dust or small debris present. So you definitely want to wet sweep if you have like renovation going on in your facility. And that involves a light mist with water to trap all the dust in one place. With dry sweeping, like I mentioned, that's it could spread dust around. That's why it's not preferred. However, that is a very traditional method of sweeping. So if you do have a broom and dustpan, it's important to just make sure you clean that regularly. Now, the steps to deep cleaning are, as I mentioned before, picking up objects off the floor, doing a HEPA vacuum throughout carpeted areas, doing a wet wash, a wet rinse, and then doing a final vacuum again. So a HEPA vacuum cleaner is a vacuum cleaner with a very special type of filter. HEPA stands for high efficiency particulate air. So that's what the filter is. And it can effectively contain microscopic lead particles. Most traditional vacuums that don't have a HEPA filter could, similar to sweeping, it can pass around dust and recirculate back into the air. So that's why HEPA filters are more successful at trapping small particles and effective against allergens. So when you vacuum, you want to make sure that the vacuum bag or the container is not full. So you want to make sure it's empty before you start vacuuming. And for traditional upright vacuums, you want to adjust the vacuum to the appropriate floor setting. Sometimes there's an actual floor setting or a high carpet setting. So you just want to make sure you have it on the right one. For canister vacuums, like most HEPA vacuums, you have different tool attachments for different surfaces. So you want to make sure that you're attaching the appropriate tool for whatever surface you're vacuuming. And then you want to carefully and completely and very slowly vacuum the entire surface with overlapping passes. So now I'm going to talk about vacuuming carpeted areas. And first I'm going to go into vacuuming wall-to-wall carpet areas. So you want to vacuum in sections of 10 square feet at a rate of about 2 minutes per section in one direction. And then after that, repeating the same vacuum over the same section, but in another direction, kind of like a crosshatch, to make sure the entire surface is covered. When it comes to vacuuming area rugs, it's a little different. So similar to vacuuming wall-to-wall areas, you want to vacuum in sections of about 10 square feet at a rate of about 1 minute each section. So instead of picking up a rug and shaking it off the dust, you don't want to do that because that can actually spread dust. So instead, you want to keep the rug where it's at, and then you want to fold it in half. Make sure you have the floor attachment on the HEPA vacuum, and then you want to vacuum the back of the rug at about 1 minute per 10 square feet section. And then after that, you're going to vacuum the floor below the rug at the same rate. After that, you will fold the rug back to its original position and then do the exact same process for the other half of the rug. And once you've completed both sides, you want to remove the floor attachment and go back to the regular power head attachment, which looks like a traditional vacuum cleaner on the bottom. And then you want to vacuum the entire surface again in 10 square feet sections at a rate of about 2 minutes per section. So very slowly. You definitely don't want to rush through the process.
So Sam, you're vacuuming the top of the area rug, you're folding it, you're doing the back of the rug, and you're doing the bare floor that you've just exposed, right? So you're doing that on one half and then the other. Is that correct?
Yes, and then after that, you want to vacuum the entire top surface once more.
Once again, okay.
Okay, now when it comes to upholstered furniture, like couches, you want to make sure you have the brush or crevice tool attachment to the vacuum. And you're going to vacuum the surface at a rate of 3 to 5 passes at a rate of about 2 minutes per 10 square feet section. And if you have removable upholstery or removable pillow cases, you want to remove them and vacuum that thoroughly. And that might be good to use with the crevice tool attachment. Now for other surfaces, like multi-surfaced areas like toys, you can use a brush attachment or a crevice tool. And same thing, you want to vacuum the entire surface, all edges, at a rate of about 3 to 5 passes. Now I'm going to go into wet cleaning. So after cleaning with a HEPA vacuum, you're going to want to do a wet cleaning using either a mopping system for floors or a wet wipe and toss process for small areas like windowsills and shelves. The mopping I'm going to give an overview of uses a 2-bucket system. So 1 bucket for the wash solution if you're washing the floor, with the other bucket being where you rinse the mop between washes. And if you're rinsing the floor after a wash, you want to have another bucket available for dipping the mop in the wet water to clean the floor with after a wash. So for the mopping cycle, the wash cycle, you want to work in small sections. Make sure you're covering the entire area, and you'll have to place a clean mop in the wash solution, and then wring it out in another bucket. So then you'll mop the floor using overlapping strokes, also in cross sections, and then you're going to place the mop in bucket number 2, which is like a mop rinse water, and that's to clean out the mop after. So you're not putting the mop in the same water that's dirty. You want to make sure you're always putting it back in the wash bucket before putting it on the floor. And it's important to change the wash bucket and the mop rinse water after every room, or more frequently if you see that it's becoming dirty.
So a question about that then, Sam. So if you have a traditional, just a regular bucket and you've got a regular mop head, is it then beneficial to make sure you've got 2 of those pails side by side and perhaps putting like a label on the front that says bucket 1 and bucket 2, so as not to confuse, which one you're using at the time, at the proper time. And would that be helpful? So that you're kind of creating your own 2-bucket system if you don't have an all-in-one system that you've perhaps purchased from a local hardware store or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. I think it would be a great idea to have these buckets labeled, because after a while it may look the same. That way you're not mopping the floor with dirty water.
Yeah, it's interesting. So as we were talking about this, you and I, and doing a little bit of our planning and preparation for this evening, we were thinking about maybe what a one-page little fact sheet perhaps could look like in terms of having a guide available for the folks as they go through this process, so that they can, you all will have this presentation at the end of the program this evening to refer back to, but there will be kind of a supplemental guide perhaps that we can have for you to download and print out, so that if you have any thoughts or confusion about what to do when, you'll have it handy. But remember, the bucket 1 is the washing solution, and bucket 2 is the rinsing solution, I think is the take home there, right?
Yep. That's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
And so after the washing cycle, you have a rinse cycle, and rinse as in like the floor instead of the mop. So the first bucket is going to be clear, warm water that you'll be using to wipe the floor after a wash. And then bucket number 2 is the water that you use to rinse the mop between mopping the floor with clear water. So similar to the wash cycle, you're going to place the mop in bucket number 1, wring it out, and then mop the floor using overlapping strokes in small sections. And then you're going to place the mop in bucket number 2, wring out the mop head, and then put the mop bucket back in bucket number 1, so that you can continue mopping the floor with clear, warm water. And this is just to reduce like any soap residue that may be left on the floor. And again, you want to change the rinse water after every room, or more frequently if you see that it's becoming murky and dirty.
So that 2-bucket system, Sam, is for both the washing of the floor and the rinsing of the floor. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you'll need to use 2 buckets for your washing and then 2 buckets for your rinsing.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to briefly talk about the wet, wipe, and toss wash cycle, because there's also a rinse cycle to this as well. So you can either use a wash solution, like in bucket number 1 that I first mentioned with the mopping, or you can apply a cleaning solution, like spray it directly onto a paper towel and then wipe. And then you're going to wipe the selected area in 1 to 2 square feet sections, so much smaller sections. It could be smaller depending if there's a lot of dirt and grime. And then you're going to repeat with using a wash solution onto a paper towel and cleaning areas until it's you see that it's free from any streaks. And then of course you want to toss these paper towels in a trash bag.
So Sam, for this particular section of the wash cycle for wetting, wiping, and tossing, that would be for areas that are anything but the floor. Is that correct? Then it would be for wiping down, as we talked about, where those surface friction areas are, the windowsills, the troughs, the banisters, things of that nature?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, you want to use this. So you want to follow up after vacuuming these small areas, you also want to wash them and rinse them as well.
Okay, thank you.
And the rinse cycle for the wet, wipe, and toss is the exact same thing. So you can either dip a paper towel in clear, warm water. You could directly spray warm water onto a paper towel. And same thing, you want to wipe in small sections until the area is cleaned and free from any streaks, and toss the paper towels in a trash bag. Now for final steps, you're going to want to do a HEPA vacuum one last time over all surfaces, whether it's carpets, upholsteries, shelves, you want to vacuum all areas again in overlapping passes at a slow to normal rate. And um, you it's an option to finish with sealants or furniture polish, but if you do, it's important to check labels for safety warnings and ingredients, and to make sure that you're not using any harmful chemicals that can pose as a hazard to children.
Yeah. So our organization, as a side note, recommends what we call third-party certified cleaning products. And so there are some labels that you could look for on your cleaning product. One of them is a Safer Choice logo that you could look for on your label, as well as Eco logo, and I believe Green Seal is still in existence. So those are 3 different certification standards where those products have been vetted and tested for both their potential for impact to both health and environment. And so those are better products and more sustainable products that people might want to seek.
Thank you, Michelle.
Sure.
Okay, now I'm gonna talk about just after cleaning, waste packaging, handling, and disposal. So it's important to make sure you put all solid waste, like paper towels, paint chips, dust, debris, all vacuum contents or sweeping contents in a plastic trash bag and securely tied with either ties or tape. You don't want to overfill a bag because there's a chance that they can spill over even when they're tied. And if your bag's very heavy, you may want to double bag it just to make sure it doesn't rip. And this is really important because you don't want these traces of lead back into the environment. You want to make sure it's being properly disposed of. And for liquid waste, like from the mopping, you want to directly toss this liquid waste into a toilet or a sanitary sewer. You don't want to dump it outside because very similar issue to the trash bag issue. You don't want to put these traces of lead back into the environment. And when you're done with the HEPA vacuum, you want to make sure it's sealed. If your vacuum has a cap, you want to put a cap at the end, or you want to put duct tape to make sure that traces of dust don't slip out of the vacuum. And to make sure clean is actually clean, you want to just use all handling instructions properly, and check your work as you go. So you want to finish off by doing as if you're doing an inspection at your own facility, and doing just a visual check to make sure that there's no dust or debris that's visible. And that's very important when it comes to inspections because dust samples are taken, and that's what determines the results of a lead dust wipe. And with that, I would like to unveil our new cleaning equipment lending library. So this lending library will be a complete cleaning kit that comes with a HEPA vacuum and a mopping kit that has all accessories available for use over a weekend. You could pick it up like on a Thursday or Friday and then return it back by Monday or Tuesday. We are currently working on integrating this system onto our websites, but as soon as that's available, you can reserve this equipment, and we can coordinate a pickup. And this equipment lending library will be completely free with a security deposit, which entails a temporary hold on a credit card. So we're not going to place a charge and reimburse it later. This will just be a temporary hold on a credit card. And
So,
this is,
go
ahead,
so
Michelle.
I'll just interject real quick, Sam. So unfortunately, right now, this is only offered in the Pittsburgh office and not in the Philadelphia location. If there's interest, perhaps down the road, we can consider the expansion of the lending library into the Philadelphia location where we have staff right now as well working in the early learning space. And so that's something else for everyone to know who's watching this webinar today, is that we do have early learning staff who are both in the Pittsburgh and the Philadelphia regions to support your centers in creating that environment that we are all striving to make certain is a green and healthy space for everyone. So just a little interjection. Sam, please continue on with your the slide that you're on here.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Sure.
So this is what the HEPA vacuum looks like if you decide to borrow from our lending library. It's quite large. It's like a commercial grade HEPA vacuum. And this is what it looks like. And these are all the different components that it comes with. So you have your hose that you're going to use at all times. And then you have the wand, which will be the middle piece between the hose and these different floor attachments, which includes, as I mentioned throughout the presentation, an upholstery tool, a carpet tool, and a tool for floors and walls and crevices as well. We also have a dual mop system component that's part of the equipment lending library, and that comes with everything as you see here. So the 2-bucket system, like I mentioned before, the mop, which has a microfiber pad and a ringer, all built into one, and with wheels for your own convenience to move around.
So folks will be required for transport on their own. Unfortunately, we don't have the capacity at this time to deliver the equipment, but we are accessible, and we'll make arrangements with you to pick up the equipment at our office location.
Yes, thank you. So with that, I would like to share these resources that we have at Women for a Healthy Environment. So the 1,000 Hours a Year program addresses the dangers of lead and radon poisoning to keep children safe and healthy in their learning environments. So what we do with this program is we help early learning centers receive the grant funding for lead and radon testing and remediation if that is necessary. And this is at no cost and completely free to participate. And early learning centers can sign up and learn more about our program here at 1000hoursayear.com. And that way you can be a champion for your early learning center. And that website does have fact sheets available as well.
Yeah. And and that's again available to the Southwestern PA region. And if you're in the Philadelphia region, we will connect you with our team out in Philly for identifying some resources that might be on the ground and available to you to do any of that work in that city. So certainly there are other resources too that it can be provided in support and technical assistance by the staff. And so the staff have a great deal of knowledge, such as Sam and then Lorna and Randy, the team in Philadelphia, to be able to help navigate through the different issues, environmental hazards that could be present in your center, to reducing, and our ultimate goal to eliminate those, to making that a healthy environment again for both children and staff.
Thank you, Michelle. And with that, I would also like to leave you all with our Eco Healthy Childcare program. And this is an award-winning endorsement program that's offered by the Children's Environmental Health Network. And it's essentially a checklist of eco-healthy changes that centers can comply with from 30 out of 35 best practices to have that endorsement as eco-friendly. And many of these practices are at no cost or low cost to help facilitate creating toxin-free early learning environments. And this is offered by our office here in Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia as well.
I think one of the other interesting things to share, Sam, is that you and Lorna are available for not only this one-on-one education, but also, providing these lessons and this information and these resources to, from a team approach. And so if a center wants to have all of their staff come together to hear and learn more about creating an eco-healthy environment, and think about all the different strategies and tools that they can incorporate with the support of the two of you, you know, that there is a team-based approach to this and that you all are on the ground and can provide that consulting as necessary.
Thank you, Michelle. That's a perfect segue to
Oh,
my contact. So yeah, you can contact me at my email, samanthah@womenforhealthyenvironment.org. This is my personal cell here. And if you're interested in the Philadelphia region, I can connect you with the point of contact in Philadelphia.
yeah. And people can also go to our website at womenforahealthyenvironment.org. And go under the early learning tab. And there's an Eastern PA tab there as well, where they could click on and learn more about the resources and the team in that location, as well as all of the resources that Sam has been able to put together for all of you. So as I think about tonight and the webinar and all the information that was shared, you know, I think some of the take-home messages are that we know that science tells us that lead is a very harmful toxin, that it impacts a child's developing brain and is something that, you know, we need to, as a community, work together to eliminate exposure. Sam, you have provided certainly a very in-depth cleaning regimen that has to occur to be able to reduce that exposure to lead and lead dust in particular. And so some of the things that we think about when we go to do our typical cleaning, right? Getting out the vacuum and cleaning a room and taking one pass over, perhaps taking a cloth in your spray bottle and doing a once over, perhaps in a particular area if you're not, you know, an area that's not thinking about sanitizing or disinfecting in an early learning environment, but more traditional cleaning. You know, the things that we talked about that are unique and somewhat different than the areas perhaps that people think about cleaning in it. And that relates to the things of that we described earlier as the windowsills and the troughs and the banisters and all of those types of baseboards, things of that nature that oftentimes you don't necessarily think about as where dust can accumulate and be present. And, you know, so a very detailed, in-depth cleaning and regimen, as you described it, is very detailed process, right? Detail oriented to be able to clean in a way that is much more invested in time, right? So that's, I think, one of the other lessons learned is that this was time consuming, but as a way to reducing those exposures, and so very critical and important. And as a result, you know, we wanted to provide you all here tonight with all of the various lessons learned throughout the process to give you tools and resources and strategies to make sure that you're protecting and creating a healthier environment, protecting the children that occupy your space on a daily basis. And so what we can do to support you in that effort, we are willing to do and wanting to do. So please feel free to reach out to Sam, and she can be a resource for you and support system throughout your journey. So that'll be my final note. Sam, if you want to encourage folks here, I'll have you just close us out for the evening.
Yes, thank you. I think you gave a really nice overview of everything we talked about tonight. But with that, I mean, I would like to share this survey with you all so you can let us know how we did. And there's also a field in that survey for me to contact you if you're interested. But that's all I have, Michelle. And I think
Okay,
that pretty
so
much was
take
it.
your phone as you're listening to this presentation. Put your phone on picture mode, camera mode, scan it over this code that you see in front, and that'll take you directly to the survey to complete. So as you have thought about what the things are that you learned tonight, or perhaps have interest in learning more ideas and more information, you can share that with Sam, and she can incorporate that into some programming that could be helpful for all of you. So with that, I think that this is our final slide. We'll just leave it here for an extra second or two to give people time to click on, hover over that image. And with that, I think that we can close out our night. Sam, a reminder to folks that you have a monthly newsletter as well that goes out with tips and tools and strategies for creating that environment that we know is green and healthy and safe for all in the early learning space, as well as other information related to programs and funding, grants that we know that we hear about, and all kinds of, wealth of information. So I would encourage people to contact you to get on your email list so that we can make sure that they get all of the information that is relevant to them, and they can pass it along to their families as well. Because what we know happens in the early learning environment can oftentimes be replicated in the home environment as well. So we want to make sure that where children spend their days, where they spend their hours, it is the healthiest and safest space possible. So I think with that, we can close out our evening, right?
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Have a nice day, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future.